A group of strangers awaken to find themselves placed in a giant cube. Each one of them is gifted with a special skill, and they must work together to escape an endless maze of deadly traps. Today, we explore the meaning of that maze and the many kinds of traps contained within it. This is Vincenzo Natali's 1997 indie sci-fi horror classic, Cube.
And now, our feature contemplation.
Speaking Cinema with Andrew Schwartz.
Welcome to the Speaking Cinema podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Schwartz, and we've got a great one today for you folks. This is the first of our Halloween series of 3 movies, all to be released in October, the final one leading up to October 31st, Halloween day or night itself. The first movie that we're talking about here is Cube, and this is a really extraordinary indie film. And just so you guys know, we have 3 very different films that we're talking about this month. And we're going to be revealing what they are a week ahead of time on our Instagram page, which is at Speaking Cinema Podcast. So check that out, give us a follow, and let us know what you think about each of these movies. Cube is extraordinary, and it's very unique, it's very different, and there's so much conceptual stuff that we have to talk about. And it's just fascinating to watch this movie, to think about this movie, and to ponder everything that it's trying to say to us without maybe overtly saying it to us. So I think I have the perfect guest here to decode all of the important information that this movie is perhaps trying to give us. We have returning to the podcast, the illustrious filmmaker, writer, producer, and director, Jesse Mendelsohn. Jesse, thank you for coming back on the podcast for day 1.
Thank you.
Of our
Thank you.
3-day Halloween series.
Yes, that's the round of applause.
The beauty pageant. Wave.
Yes, no. That's the round of applause from the gallery.
Okay, this is an ongoing sequence of clapping and waving. Gotcha.
Yeah, so I'm super excited for this movie. It's incredible how much they say with a single location, not just a single location, a single set.
Right.
Some lighting changes, CGI, and creativity. It's just that's all you need, and you can have a full meal of a movie.
Yeah, it is amazing. It's very inspiring, actually. Like Vincenzo Natali, the director, had said that he watched the Alfred Hitchcock film Lifeboat, which I actually haven't seen. Have you seen it?
Neither have I, no.
Yeah, that's kind of a little more obscure one. And the whole thing takes place on this lifeboat. And he said he was wondering if he could even make a movie like this work. It takes place in essentially one location at least, which plays as different rooms as well. But he thought, well, I watched this movie Lifeboat, where not only do the characters stay in literally one place, one boat the whole time, they barely even get up and move. And that's incredible. So he said if Hitchcock... And he said it was one of the best, most cinematic movies he's ever seen.
Oh, wow. So, okay, I'm going on Amazon right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm looking for it. Lifeboat.
Add that to cart.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going on my wish list.
Save for later. Save for later
at the least.
Yeah.
Wish list, save for later. I might even buy it now with one click. But anyway. Yeah, so he was very inspired by that. And he said, you know what? We can make this work. And he wrote it with his kind of lifelong friend or longtime friend. And, his roommate pitched in. And it was a conglomeration of a bunch of different efforts to kind of hone in and create what it ended up being, which is this very focused and yet also very broad at the same time, allegorical, but also specific, kind of depends on how you look and think about it, movie that's also terrifying and creepy and scary in such a unique way. So much intensity in this movie. Incredible. So what we're going to do for you folks, let's start out with some overall takes. I'm going to give you my overall take on the movie, what I think it means, the significance of it, and then Jesse's going to give us his take, and then hopefully we're going to justify everything we're saying throughout this conversation, and we'll feel free to challenge each other as well.
Exactly.
So, all right.
I am ready to challenge and be challenged.
Good. That's what we're here for. That's what we do here.
No, it'll be fun. It'll be fun.
Because, folks, this is the only podcast about movies exclusively about the meaning of the movie itself. So you can't get that anywhere else. So welcome. You're in the right place. So my take on Cube. I think Cube is a movie, Jesse, that explores the mysteries and complexities of the human condition in the postmodern world. That's sort of my general assessment. It addresses the mysteries and complexities of what it is to be human, the human condition, particularly in the postmodern world. With our technology and Moore's law, technology is just exponentially increasing and affecting us more and more. And it's about taking almost a snapshot of what it is to be human in a postmodern environment where the technology seems to rule, in a sense, right? And then I think more specific, just to hone in a little more specifically on that, I think that the movie is about the danger of rampantly increasing technological innovation and how the industry of this technology has an inevitable power, a force that intoxicates us and changes us and challenges us. That's what I think that this movie's about.
Okay.
What's your quick thought about that?
Okay, so that's very interesting. Before I get into mine, I just wanted to say that mine is sort of on the same train track as yours, but it's going the other way. I focus less on the technology and more on the base instinct of humanity, and less about how the modern world has been affected by changes in humanity or even the origin of humanity. Whereas I've been thinking about society and systems created throughout history and the evolution of essentially the same interactions again and again, repeating throughout history.
Interesting. Sure. I'm really excited to hear more detail about that, because that's also very interesting to me. Okay, so Jesse and I are going to move on to our title takes for this movie. We're just going to take a look at what we think about the title in the context of what we just said. So, Jesse, I'll have you go first, because I went first last time.
Of course.
What do you think of this title, Cube, as it has to do with what we think this movie is?
I mean, of course, it's evocative, it's simplistic, it perfectly describes the form of the movie, but I think it also describes the concept of what it's thinking about society, in the sense that we live on a globe and these people live in a cube, and I think this is their whole world. And I think the cube, in what I'm going to discuss, is a microcosm of society, and it's the whole world wrapped into a small story.
Yeah. One-word titles are very evocative, I think, by nature. Even if the word is ordinary, for some reason, right, when you're fixated on that one word, it's like that game that you play, right, where you keep repeating a word, just one word, and it starts to lose its meaning, right? And it even sounds strange.
Yeah.
You lose track and you lose your bearings on the language itself that the word comes from. Right?
Parakeet. Parakeet.
That is a word. That would work. That qualifies.
Yeah.
Parakeet.
No, but if I said it 1,000 more times, it would lose all parakeet.
Exactly.
Anyway, sorry, I won't.
Exactly.
I won't.
And you could do that with any of these, right? And I think there's something about that we know as people. So when we hear a one-word title, it's evocative naturally, because you attach all the context you can just to that one thing. You focus so hard in on it.
And then you lose that context by the end of making it.
Right. Because then at the end of it, you realize, I'm just building this context completely subjectively.
Yes, exactly.
And the movie doesn't act, the title, the word doesn't have any actual like intrinsic value or meaning.
Parakeet.
It's very strange.
Yeah.
Parakeet.
All right, let's
Jesse
move on.
will say it every 5 minutes for the podcast.
It'll be longer in between each time I say it.
So I really do like this title, especially because I think a shape as a title, not even forgetting the context of this, but there's something that does capture the vibe of the movie, because it's mathematical, it's complex. It's not just 2 dimensions, it's 3. Right? When you think of cube, at least when I do, I think of some sort of that I think of that multiple dimension. I think of the depth and the complexity, that extra dimension, that extra axis. I think of a Rubik's Cube, maybe.
Yeah.
Which is, the entire idea is complexity that's trying to be cracked. I think of cubic feet instead of square feet, which is, I think of, 3-dimensional. When you're playing 3-dimensional chess, you're saying that something is extremely complex and you're trying to decode it.
And it's so simple and so complex that it's the perfect, it's the perfect form for it perfectly matches the themes and the imagery. It's a great title.
It also reminds me of another thing that Natali, the director, said in the commentary. He was talking about how when they were constructing the cube, ironically, he's not a math person at all. He even says he had a phobia of math, which I found utterly fascinating. Doing this movie actually turned him on a little bit to math because it was so interesting. But what he said about the cube in the movie was when they were constructing it, consulting the mathematician and so on, and doing the research. Get this. He said that it was like discovering something that already existed as opposed to creating the cube.
Yeah.
Isn't that fascinating?
I mean, it's like math itself.
Right. Discovering geometry or discovering, algebra or trigonometry, something that seems to already be there in the ether somewhere as a natural law, say. And I thought that was really cool.
And he's just commenting on it. He's not creating it.
Right. He said it almost built itself in that respect.
Yeah, it's like each variable filled in other variables, which is just like algebra.
Yes.
As you figure one part out.
Right. So back to the title, it is almost like naming the movie a system, after a system of laws that already exists. It's like naming a movie Algebra, or something like that. And
I'm sorry, we're not greenlighting algebra.
We're not greenlighting algebra. No, I agree. Not even as a forquel to the Cube series.
Wait, hold on. Let me do the math on that.
Yeah.
It's like algebra. So it's cube, triangles.
There is
square.
a Circle. There's a series they made called Circle, which is sort of a spinoff of
They did a sequel and then they did a remake later. Anyway.
Yeah, there's a whole geometrical menagerie.
There's a cinematic geometrical universe.
Whole polygon cinematic menagerie of movies that exists here.
The ACU, the Algebra Cinematic Universe. That's better. That's I not to toot my own horn, but that's a little better, I think.
Yeah, I think it is. I think you nailed it, actually.
Thank you.
So all nerdiness aside, it has that complexity built into it. I think you said it perfectly. Simplicity and complexity simultaneously, which I think factors into both of our takes here. And that's what the movie, that's what the movie runs on.
Yeah. And
what keeps you watching.
We're looking at the DVD cover right now. Mm-hmm. And the tagline under the title is a warning. Like, guys, do not think you're going to find out why. The tagline literally says, "Don't look for a reason, look for a way out."
Right.
and that's a little misleading because it does want you to think about the reason, but it's saying you're not getting a reason.
Yes.
It's telling you up front. Think, react, feel, respond.
Right. And I think that's a good subtitle tagline to it's a compliment to the title.
Yeah.
Cube, because it doesn't come with an instruction manual. It just sort of is, and therefore you can't focus on reading the manual, even though that's sort of what the characters need to do. You just need to focus on saving yourself from yourself.
Yeah.
As the Wren will say, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, incredible title, which complements the movie perfectly. It just is. It just exists.
Yeah.
And it's so evocative and fun and mysterious. Okay, Jesse, let's move on to the opening image, followed by the opening sequence of this film. I'm going to summarize for everyone, and we're going to kind of break it apart a little bit and give our takes on that opening sequence and opening image and how it has to do with what we're thinking about. We open with a couple of white titles over black, then an extreme close-up of an eye wincing, then opening widely, revealing a dilated retina and a blue-gray colored iris. And this is really cool. The iris, I don't know if you noticed, is textured with a series of interweaving wishbone-like veiny structures. That's the best way I could describe it. You can really see it on a big screen very well. Then we cut to the wide of Alderson, a bald, vampiric-looking character in an almost fetal position on the floor in a gray, what looks like a prison jumpsuit. He comes to and gets up. Then a medium shot reveals he is enclosed by a square pattern cubic room, illuminated by white light behind square panels. Low-frequency rumbling ambience and creaking sounds are heard all around him. Alderson rotates the door handle and opens the square door, which reveals the next room, a duplicate of the current one, but blue. He surveys the room, then enters it. The door to the blue room closes on its own. I can't wait to get to the good stuff here. Alderson chooses the middle door next. He sees a red room, then closes the door and chooses another. It reveals an orange room. He climbs into the orange room and hesitates for a moment, looks left to right, then takes a step forward. Then a loud, sudden, metallic thwapping sound. That's the best I can come up with. Thwap.
Yeah.
Doesn't really exist, but whatever. It rings out, causing Alderson to jolt and then stand perfectly still with his eyes widened. Then a close-up of his name on his jumpsuit, forming a square lines of blood penetrating through his body and clothing. Then another profile close-up of the lines of blood forming on Alderson's head and face. Then the blood drips down to the floor. Then another head close-up and cracking sounds as Alderson's ear and the side of his head falls off, followed by his hand falling apart into cubes. Then his whole body splits in half and falls apart, the cubic chunks of his flesh toppling over like a Jenga tower being tipped over in slow motion.
Yeah.
I couldn't wait to say that.
Oh, you would, yeah.
Then a large square pattern diced cage is revealed, a metal one, with Alderson's blood on it. It kind of descends from the ceiling. Then it folds back up quickly, ascending back into the ceiling of the orange room with a large clanking sound. The title slowly appears over white as prisms and cubes assemble and mesh with each other to form the word cube, with a very creepy sci-fi metallic ambience sound. Then it turns to black and fades away.
Yeah.
Wow.
That is an opening.
Hell yeah.
The two things.
A rock concert.
Yeah,
of an opening.
yeah, I know. It's like how do you top that moment? It's like you got to wait a bit. But
Yeah.
the two little details I love about the scene are, one, the shot where it shows his body and you see the left half of the body sort of standing a little higher, and you see the organs on the inside. It's just so
Yes.
gross and so like detailed.
Yes.
The other one that's kind of funny to me is the actual rack of wire that cuts him. It looks incredibly realistic as it folds back. It looks like just like a wire that snapped. Mm-hmm. And then it folds up in the most ridiculous CGI way. You know, it just like folds in an impossible.
Right.
But that moment when you first see the cage, I think of it as like the edge of a cage almost.
Yeah.
Slide back down lightly.
Yeah.
All I could think of is like, it's society tearing him apart.
Yeah.
I mean, of course it sets the mood, it sets the angle, and it sets the tone of the traps. But really, I think it's just like so clear.
Yeah.
It's like everything is cube. Everything is cube. It's perfect.
And even just the way that it happens is so, like you're saying, it's so specific and deliberate that he gets across that idea to us that it is designed to do this and nothing else very instantaneously. You know, and like you said, even the way that it folds up, which is, even though impossible, it gives us the right notion.
Yes.
And the notion is, to me at least, that it's it's engineered specifically for this to hide as soon as possible so that it can do it again for the next person that enters.
Yeah. I mean, there's some simulations of spikes that look so fake, and yet I believe it because I believe this cube.
Right.
Because this cube, it's supposed to be the height of technology and the height of machinery.
Right.
Like you're talking about, that even as it folds in like a simulation like the T-1000 in Terminator 2, just liquid sim falls into the wall into nothing.
Right.
And yet
right.
I think, no, that's not bad CGI. That's what the technology in this world does.
Yeah. Well, that's what's so cool about movie making in general, right? It's that you can take things and you can take magic, because we know that magic isn't real, of course, right? When we're going to a magic show, say, but we're not paying to see reality. Right?
We're paying to be fooled.
We're paying to be fooled in a way that means something to us. And it gives us some kind of a reaction. Laughter, fear, right? Chris Angel mind freak. When I see stuff like that, it scares the living hell out of me, right? But when you see a horror movie, when you see something like this that is so horrific, the horrors of the world are very real. But it's the specific, it's not a set piece because it's an effect, but the specific way that he shows it to us and draws it out, it makes it evocative in a certain way that reality couldn't. And so it kind of transcends and crosses over into this space of, okay, I'm seeing this thing. It's not realistic, but it has this horrifying consequence that makes me feel something very specific. And it forces me to think about what it is and why it is in the context of what I'm watching.
Because it moves at the speed of the audience's thought.
Yeah, there's a rhythm to it.
Yeah.
And the rhythm itself says so much.
Yeah.
Like you just laid out.
The other really interesting thing about this is that this trap moves at the speed of society, in the sense that something happens and you react. And that is just life, Yeah. Oh, you have a car payment. Your setback,
Yeah.
Student loans, you didn't think about what the job was, what the career was. It's like life is a series of snake pits and traps that you're just walking through.
Yes.
And all of a sudden you're caught in a grate of metal wires and turned into
There's a
jelly.
stimulus. There's some kind of stimulus.
Yeah.
That forces you to
and
react.
And it has nothing to do with you. It has absolutely nothing to do with you. It is just the way the system is.
Sure. Or does it? I think that's going to be a good debate and topic.
Yeah.
That's going to be a topic that we're going to get to.
That'll be fun.
It might have everything to do with everyone. Who knows? We're going to get into the weeds of that.
Find someone to blame.
Right. Exactly. So I have a little bit of a take just in and of itself on the opening here.
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. I'm going to give it to you. So this opening image, the very first thing that we see is an eye opening, right, in a kind of sleepy way. But it looks so. It's another effect, I'm sure, of these like wishbone, like fractal pattern, like overlapping structures that you see in the guy's eye.
Right.
It's almost like it's not even human. It could be just sort of like the reflection of the cube in his eye, in his iris, but it almost looks like alien a little bit. And that got me thinking. And then once he opens his eye, it cuts to the full body of Alderson. And he's bald, he's a little hunched, he's in an almost fetal position. And I'm thinking that this opening works as a short film in and of itself, in my eyes, as almost like an allegory for just the birth and death of a human life.
Yeah.
He's essentially being reborn, or born, in a 2001-ian kind of way, maybe, in this cube. He's placed from one world into another, but it is representative of a sort of birth where when a baby is just born, it almost doesn't look human. It hasn't formed yet. And he hasn't formed yet, in the sense that this whole opening's purpose, the sequence, is to teach you the rules of this universe, right? We're like Alderson as viewers. We don't understand what this place is. We've never seen anything like it. We don't know the rules. We don't know the regulations. So sets out to do that for us. But through Alderson, we're sort of reborn, and it's taking him through life, like you just said. It's taking him through paying taxes and growing up and, finding out how the doors work, finding out that, ooh, pretty colors, right? Ooh, there's another color over here. There's another room over here. There are different avenues in life. It's almost like he's growing up in a new world before our eyes.
Yeah.
Right. And then he encounters an issue. It's not
just an issue.
The IRS comes to get him, Jesse. This is what this means.
Yeah.
No. So he goes. He just this trap happens to him, and he's cubed, and he's cubed like a good piece of like meat that you want to dig into.
Like a yeah.
It's hard to describe it compared to anything. Cheese. There you go. He's cheesed. He's cheese cubed. And then he sort of becomes part of the structure because it's creating, copies and duplicates of itself somehow. And like you said, everything is cubes. It's cubes within cubes within cubes, really. And and then he meets his end at this horrible mistake of going into the wrong room, taking the wrong decision. Right, but it almost seems so innocent.
Yeah,
and there is something so human about that.
Because it's so early, he has no idea.
Right,
it's like he's been left to the wolves.
Right, like how many times have you read about or heard of a tragic story about a human being getting hit and killed by a drunk driver? Right, we all know this happens.
Yeah,
it's not because the person is immoral, the victim, right? It's the world, it's the system around that person of which they're a part. But it's the error coding, the syntax error of the coding of the world, say, that's acting, the mutations, the unforeseen evil of the world that does exist, that acts upon an innocent person, and acts upon someone somehow. And that's how this guy meets his end. And in that way, I think Natali is establishing to us, this is a place in which like the world, we don't really make that connection yet per se, but like the world, a person can meet their end for not a reason that's of their own making. The world itself acts upon them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of our surface level understanding of it. And I think that Alderson here, the choice of actor, the distinct look, the bald head, the fetal position at the beginning, how he meets it's a perfect microcosm of the cold, callous, only running on metal, no emotion, no human aspect of this world. And that's what makes it so terrifying and effective.
Yeah. He just is, and then he isn't.
Yes, and such is life. In any world that, can harbor life.
Yeah. What's I think I've said it on this before, but none of us are getting out of this alive. It's like that old chestnut.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah, we're not in a cube here, we're in a sphere.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But it's, it's a sphere within spheres within spheres. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So,
frankly, it's a cube with a space surrounded by another cube.
Right.
Potentially.
Right. It's all shapes. It's a tangram of a universe. But anyway.
Yeah.
So now, I'm so excited for this, Jesse. This is probably my favorite segment, Scenic View. For those of you that haven't joined us yet, this is when we get to jump around in the movie to different scenes and qualify our takes and explore all the different specific examples, or from a bird's eye view, either one. We can zoom in if we want to uncover the meaning with specific examples and to just think about all of the interconnectivity of the movie and how it's constructed. So I would like to begin this actually by asking you a question, Jesse, because this is our first of the 3 Halloween episodes. And we chose a very unique kind of horror movie here. And I just want to simply ask you, and I think this is going to bring us into the movie itself pretty nicely. What the hell makes this a horror movie? Beside what we just talked about, because the opening is very scary and freaky. But what makes this movie scary? What makes this a choice for this month? And, leading up to All Hallows Eve, and, what titillates us in a creepy way about this movie?
I think the scariest thing for me in movies is a lack of control, inevitability. You know, you think of Scream, even though it's a parody, you think of the Ghostface killer and the movie's continuing and it feels inevitable. You'll survive this one, but you won't survive the series.
Right.
You know, and that's a different situation, but there's this inevitability. And Ghostface Killer was always the scariest to me as a kid.
Yeah.
That's why I bring him up.
Yeah, me too.
And despite never seeing Scream, he was so scary that I never saw Scream, despite the fact that apparently it's a comedy.
Same here until I was older, but
I still haven't seen it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'll watch it someday.
Check that out. Yeah.
But in this case, I think the inevitability of you move, you die, you stay, you die, is just
without a particular external villain. That's right. A villain that knows the entire bird's eye view of the game.
Yeah.
And the goal.
We don't get clues. We don't stick with them.
And acts upon the protagonists in such a way where it challenges them to try and, battle the ultimate evil, say, right? That trope, that archetype. What this movie does, I totally agree with you, is it says, in a sense, it gives us the ultimate plot twist. There's a scene that I'm just so excited to talk about. I think we have to talk about it first because I can't help myself. It's Worth's confession scene. Because I feel like that's going to just give us everything that's going to need to come after.
I think that'll
right?
be the centerpiece. Yeah.
So what I was going to say was that scene gives us not exactly a clear answer in the sense that now we can write an essay on what this is and all the particulars of it. But it gives us what I think could be the greatest and most powerful plot twist of all time, right? Is that all of the characters in the movie are the villain. They're all responsible. They all built the cube. Because of a lot of movies in the past that use this kind of technique in a more traditional way than this film does, of course, conceptually. But because of all those other things that we're used to, there's this sense that you're waiting for something to happen, especially with the Worth character, right? You're waiting for, is Quentin really the spy? Are they trying to throw me off? Is Worth a spy? And if he is, in what capacity? But what is really going on here? Who actually knows something? There's so little context. It's so bare bones.
Yeah.
That you're wondering what is the key component, like an escape room sort of aspect of where is that hidden clue that's going to get these people out? And they have that in the movie. But I think I was thinking of it more like which character provides that key. But what do you think of this whole concept that of the twist that Worth, I think, is implying and trying to describe, where he says that the point is that it's pointless. What do you think about that? In fact, I'm going to read this quick exchange. This is part of Worth's monologue. Mm-hmm. Okay, folks, so we just really need to hone in on this. There is no conspiracy. Nobody is in charge. It's a headless blunder operating under the illusion of a master plan. Big Brother is not watching you. If this place ever had a purpose, then it got miscommunicated or lost in the shuffle. This is an accident, a forgotten perpetual public works project. You think anybody wants to ask questions? All they want is a clear conscience and a fat paycheck. Then Quentin says, why put people in it? Worth says, because it's here. You have to use it or you admit it's pointless. Quentin says, but it is pointless. Worth says, this is the most chilling line in the movie. Quentin, that's my point. Nobody wants to see the big picture. Life's too complicated. We are all part of the system. I think what's being implied here is that everyone is responsible. And I think that's why Worth is so cynical. He's not just guilty. He's cynical, right at the beginning of the movie. And I think this is why.
I think that's absolutely correct about Worth. The only thing is, just like Quentin believes in the system or believes that a similar point of view about there is no everyone's just head down work, bigger job, bigger office.
Yeah.
And Holloway's military industrial complex.
Right.
That's his opinion. I don't think he's right.
You don't believe Worth is right.
I believe he believes it. I believe that's his perspective.
Sure.
But I don't know that that's the answer we're looking for.
Right. Do you mean it's not the answer we're looking for right now in this conversation, or it's not the objective answer to how the cube was built?
Both.
Oh, okay.
I don't think it's the objective way the cube was built, but I also think all 3 points of view are what we should be discussing.
Right.
Not just, I mean, I assume we're going to get to all of them, but
Yeah.
I think each point of view should be viewed with equal weight. Just because he says, oh, this is what it is because I couldn't find the answer.
Yeah.
But he didn't find the answer, but that doesn't mean there is no answer.
Right.
It just means
There
he
has
doesn't
to be there is an answer.
Yeah,
we do know that for sure.
But what he doesn't have, but what he has is a lack of faith in himself.
Yes.
Because of when I mean, how do you discover they're putting people in it when you don't even know what it is? And that's actually just the tangent. That's the thing that bothered me is this guy builds a shell and designs it and works with a bunch of people who don't know what's going on, but they also don't know that they don't know what's going on. But then he knows what's going on, and then he starts researching it. It's one of those things. It's one of those things that really tickles my brain. That they don't go into, and I kind of love it. But
right,
these ideas and these questions. But it makes me think that, like, how did he know for months they were putting people in there? Like, how did he learn that? By digging, but there's nowhere to dig, he says.
He might have just heard rumors. Like, hey, you were a contractor on this job too. You know what's going on? I heard they were putting people in there. So I also like that Natali doesn't give us the exact answer, because that's not the point of the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? The point of the movie is to examine just the existential situation that they're in regardless.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that feeds into what I was asking, which was why it's so scary.
Yeah.
It's so scary because we don't know the answer. We're locked into this stalemate. The scariest part is that the monster is the consequence of actions that are unclear.
Yeah.
And the unclarity of those actions are, what Worth is saying, is just sort of this amalgamation of the boundless human stupidity that perpetuates blunders like this.
Right.
Blunder after blunder, layer after layer, blunders within blunders.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Cubes within cubes.
Yeah. But the blunder is the point. It is not an accident.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
My personal perspective actually weirdly lines up more with Holloway in the set. Not that like every detail of our lives is controlled or anything like that.
Right.
But when something goes wrong and someone stands to gain from it that they caused, that's not an accident anymore.
Right. But it could still feel like one.
Yes.
And that's where the complexity comes in. Yeah.
It feels like an
strange.
accident. But if you decide to deregulate trains, and then there are more train accidents, but the amount of money they saved by not regulating by not following regulations outweighs the amount of money they lose on derailments, and derailments skyrocket.
Right.
That's not an accident. That's not a train accident anymore.
Yes.
It's a calculated risk.
Yes, exactly. It's a consequence of particular policy, say.
Yeah.
And politics is a part of this, but I love how he doesn't connect specific policy and politics, ideology into this. It's just more of like I said, it's an amalgamation result. And that's so scary to me, Jesse. Yeah. It's so scary and horrifying, a lot more than going into the water and being eaten by a shark, because these are our waters. This is not, right? This is our habitat as humans. It's not us going into a dream world that we're unfamiliar with, say, or it's not It's not us going into the water
Yeah.
and we see that fin going toward us. And it's not going to an alien civilization and they start to prey on us or anything. This is completely reflexive horror.
Yeah.
In a way.
But the one thing I keep pushing back on is the idea that they're all complicit. It's this idea that, like,
right.
by participating in society, you have contributed to society's ills.
Yes.
It's like, how do you, it's like that,
Sure.
it's that conversation because none of them are directly, except Worth, complicit, as far as I understand. Maybe I've missed something.
Right.
They're complicit in the game of the trap.
Well, they are, but Levin does. I know it's kind of vague and removed and not specific, but
Yeah,
Levin. Remember when Levin says, "Hello, I've been guilty of ruining the world since I was like 7."
Yeah. But she's talking about as a member. She's talking about from society, not from directly creating the cube.
Creating the cube.
Yeah.
Right. But I guess Worth is drawing the connection between the cube and the society that built the cube. He's almost saying that they're one and the same. That it's almost like it's an inevitable byproduct
Right.
of the human stupidity that is running the outside world. It's just a microcosm of the world that you live in. It's almost like, what's the difference?
Yeah.
Right. And that's one of the most interesting questions the movie poses. What's the difference between, if there is any, between the inside of this cube and what's outside of it?
Yeah. No. I love that part. I think there's so much fodder there. The idea that everyone reverts to their base instincts.
Right.
The bleeding heart, the cop who
Takes it too far.
who not
Crumbles
only
under pressure. Too.
crumbles under
Yeah.
pressure,
Yeah.
but believes so righteously
Yes.
until they become the thing they hate.
Yes.
You get the young student know-it-all who's ready. I mean, she's smart, but she's ready to be convinced.
Yes.
She at first she follows Quentin, then she follows Holloway, then she follows Worth. She's young and impressionable, which which we definitely have to talk about.
Yes, she's learning.
The idea that these individuals all represent parts of the system that we live in currently. I wonder if that makes them complicit. I'm not sure. I'm not convinced.
Yeah, I mean, what's cool about this is that you can draw the line to the complicitness if you want to. It's there. It's available.
Yes.
You can take one of these people that, like you said, represents some sort of sector of the human race and different philosophies,
Or
and
not
different
just the
thoughts.
human race, society, maybe.
Yeah, societies, systems.
Yeah.
Of societies, but like you said, this is all about systems, and I think that's a great take, by the way. Systems of societies created by the human race. You can take each type of philosophy, each type of society, or each type of person within the society, and then I think you can draw the line from that person to creating the cube. I do think you can. Right? It's that whole concept of politics where you go too far right, too far left, and they collide with each other.
Right.
Right? Or you end up as you veer farther from the center of the spectrum, you veer farther and farther into subjugation.
Right. Whereas I have a very different perspective, which is what's so cool about watching movies, is that what you bring to it changes what you get out of it.
Sure. Hey, we might say this every episode. The words of the great Adam Secafico, bring your own baggage. BYOB. Yes. And that's the cool thing about these characters. They've each brought their own baggage to the cube.
Yes.
And it's not just about, I think like what you were saying and implying, it's not just about the cube and the traps of the cube. It's about the baggage that these people bring into the cube. And it ultimately justifies what Ren says, where you have to save yourselves from yourselves. And I think one of the most fascinating things about this, it's endlessly fascinating, every single scene, every moment, but this twist at the end, it's just twist after twist. You know what I'm going to say. The twist at the end where they should never have left the room that they started in.
Yeah.
what? I mean, that perfectly says so many erroneous, describes all of the errors of society throughout history.
Yeah.
Right?
You go up, you go down, you go left, you go right, and...
Yeah, you hit traps. People get murdered. People get hurt.
And then
abused.
It turns out the best way to survive society is to walk in the footsteps of everyone else who survived it.
Yes, exactly.
Is to follow the path.
Or to, in a sense, just not veer outward.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, right? Human nature, this is part of the human condition. This movie is saying it's part of human nature. We're an explorative species. It's like there's no reason for us, in our hard wiring and in just the suspense of the movie and the suspense of the situation, there's no reason for them to sit and do nothing when there are doors to go into.
Yeah.
It's like that big red button theory. How long will you stand? How long will you last before you finally push it? Right?
Yeah.
And that is what it is to be human.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where I'm thinking everyone wants to reinvent the wheel. And everyone wants to be the one to figure something out. Maybe not everything out, but something out. And it makes me think like, oh, I'll push the red button. Mm-hmm. I'll be the one. But sometimes you need to follow the path of others, I think. And that's and in certain and I don't mean others as in others in the cube. I mean the path laid for you.
Yeah.
Everything is telling you don't leave this room.
Yeah. Except the wren.
Well, actually, now that I think about it, most of them don't start off in that room. Just Worth.
Right. Well, it's Worth and... Oh, you're right. It's just Worth. And then
because
Quentin
comes up.
Quentin emerges from hell below with bloody hands. And so
exactly.
On. Yeah.
Levin falls down and that's how her glasses break, which leads us to the clue that she's in the original room.
Right.
The doctor comes in the room. And Quentin almost murders her immediately.
Yeah. And it makes sense that Worth is in the room that they shouldn't leave.
Yeah.
It's such a good script.
I know. But what I'm thinking about is this idea that we live in this world where we're trying to figure out our own way and the path is so clear in front of us. The simplest ways. It's like all these people going... like, hey, if you want to be rich, don't put money in your 401k. Like all the other rich people who've done it, this will get you uber rich. Yep. And this will be all these little tips and habits that like will reinvent the way things work.
Yes.
When the system and society are designed a different way.
Yeah. But the illusion is so strong.
Yes.
The path is so there. You can envision it. You can see it. Kind of like looking through one of the passageways at the next room.
Yeah. Follow the guy who's escaped from 7 prisons.
And that's what I was going to say.
Or follow the guy who got put in 7 prisons.
Right. Right. It all has 2 coins. There's no one objective way, right? So and that's the toss up. That's the whole complexity of the whole situation and the human condition again. But yeah, the wren is a perfect manifestation of what you're saying. The wren tells them, hey, no, hold on.
You better smarten up. I love that.
I actually wrote it down.
Oh, you did? You're going to do a dramatic...
I'm going to do a dramatic reading.
Yes.
No more talking. No more guessing. Don't even think about nothing that's not right in front of you. That's the real challenge. You got to save yourselves from yourselves. Do you see why I didn't get the role?
No.
Yeah, I was also 5 at the time.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's regardless. So... But he's so confident, and even Holloway is very excited when she sees him. An escape artist, right?
Yeah.
And then he's like, yeah, flew the coop 7 times or whatever. And then he says, this is what you got to do, right? This is what you got to do. This is how you got to be. Don't do this. Don't do that. Trust me. And then what happens next, Jesse?
He immediately gets murked. and
his face turns into a punch bowl.
Yeah, of human face and goo and acid. The one question I have is, he's like, the name's French in the most like American like old person accent, and then he curses in French like that's his base instinct, but he has no accent. It's not like it's not like he's speaking English
Right.
to like communicate with them. He has the most American accent.
Right. I
Like
know.
the most like he grew up during the Great Depression and like
Yes.
and he's gonna if they don't smarten up and play ball, you know.
Yeah. And there's another moment where, and maybe this is like the French-Canadian sort of
Maybe.
injection into the movie because it's Canadian.
was-
But remember when Levin says, bonjour,
Yeah,
you're bad at math or whatever it is.
yeah, exactly. And then the other one that's my favorite is when Worth says, "I guess I don't have a joie de vivre."
Oh, that's right. I wasn't bursting with joie de vivre before I got
Yeah,
here.
even though it's
so-
joie de vivre,
Yeah, that's
because
right.
you don't say the. I'm pretty sure you don't say the re at the end.
Vivre or something
Vivre.
like that. I don't know, maybe.
But the way he says it makes it seem like, how do you know that word and not know and say
it's
it
so
like that?
North American.
Yeah, exactly. But that actor's Canadian, and I know this.
Yes, but probably not French-Canadian.
No, I don't think he's French Canadian. No, but I know this because he's on Stargate Atlantis.
Yeah, he's
which
a great actor.
He's really good. He's on Stargate Atlantis, and he plays a know-it-all jerk scientist. I love that show. It's such a great
David Hewlett. Yeah,
David
also
Hewlett.
named David in real
Yeah,
life.
yeah. And David Hewlett is really fun on Stargate Atlantis,
Mm-hmm.
but this is not a Stargate Atlantis podcast,
No, it's not. And yeah, but that whole idea.
which
yeah.
Jason Momoa starred in. That was like his early role. Okay, I could go on
A
forever.
Jason
but-
Momoa podcast.
yeah. Jason Momoa. Oh God, I have 3 jokes, and I'm not going to say any of them.
These are the 2 biggest surprises of this podcast so far. Number 1, Parakeet. And number 2, Jason Momoa. I just have to say that.
Yeah.
But I love that. I love how Natali does this to us. He tells you that this character is so
Yeah.
confident. He has a history. He has a backstory. He has a purpose and a talent.
And it's naturally folded in. The guy figures it out. He doesn't
Right.
say, "Listen to me, I'm the Wren."
Right? He even says, "Hey, I'm only you're only here because of your boots. I'm going to get rid of you as soon as I can." He's so confident, and we get this such a strong feeling that this guy is going to lead them, or he's going to at least survive at the very least halfway through the movie.
Right.
Right. And then acid to the face, crispy, crackling, flesh melting, exploding. He screams like an infant, you know.
And I
then
love that he figures it
sizzles.
out the second before. Like, he is good.
Yes.
But you can't survive a trap. You have to not
Yeah.
go in the trap room.
And it was so yes, and it was so scary to me when Quentin says electrochemical or whatever, and he missed it. The Wren missed it. That's fucking great. This is like 10 minutes into the movie.
Yeah, I know.
So it's like the movie
We've already
convinces
killed
you.
2. Yeah.
We've already killed 2. The movie fully convinces you that this guy, like, oh, the boot thing. You're thinking as an audience member, why didn't I think of that? This guy's good. Oh, the button thing keeps the saliva flowing. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
This guy has got major points, like super cube cred going on here,
Yeah.
right? And then his face explodes out of his body. It's so
Or
cool.
into his body.
Implodes into
Yeah.
his body. Yeah.
But I also I love when Quinn says, like the Wren said, stick, just focus on ahead. And he goes, look at him.
Oh yeah, he says that's what he said.
Yeah.
That's what that guy said. as he's sizzling like a bacon on the ground.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Get some cheek meat while you're at it.
Right.
I also love how funny that moment is. You're sitting there, you're like, yes, let's do it. And then he just acid to the face. I was
Yeah.
howling, laughing.
Were you?
No, it was full. It was full werewolf.
It's horrifying, but you're right. It's so visceral and crazy, especially the way that he shoots it. Like this is mostly handheld.
Yeah, the zoom in, the smash zoom in on his face.
The smash zoom on his. I love the smash zooms in this movie. They're so effective. Yeah, like it almost smash zooms in on on his face, and then on the
little pointer.
flamethrower thing or the acid thing. Yeah, and then it also when they open the door and his face is there and he's screaming even though he doesn't even have a face.
Yeah.
And the reaction of the rest of the inmates, if you want to call them, is just, it's horrifying. And then he also handheld moves in on Levin's face to see her reaction as they pull him in. And it's horrifying, But the way he screams, and then the way that the door like closes on its own right as it happens, so they can't even see his face melting.
Yeah.
And they save it for a jump scare when they open the door again, and he's just like there.
Yeah.
There's a combination of funny and horrifying, and we're not invested in the characters enough to feel like we're truly grieving the loss of, say, the Wren, or the feeling empathy toward the other reactions of the inmates. So you're right. We get this weird feeling of like it's so stylized, and it's this combination of feelings.
It's the joy of the movie.
Yeah, it's the joy of plot elements that are truly interesting,
and it's like
and told in an interesting way.
This is what I'm here for.
Yes,
and then we don't get it for a while.
Yeah.
We get the suspense and the tension for a long time.
Right. Which is really fascinating in and of itself.
Yeah.
Like it establishes itself as a sort of, deadly trap movie. Oh, this is going to be a wonderful game of watching people die in some, cool, wonderful traps.
Right.
That are very innovative. And then the traps slowly fade into the background and become barely any presence in the movie.
Yeah. That said, there are two really cool traps coming up that I love.
Okay, so then you lead us, on our way, Jesse. What's the next trap that you want to talk about? We'll start there.
I want to talk about the first trap they think isn't a trap, which is when Quentin walks into the room.
Yeah.
And they think they figured out the prime numbers instead of, I guess it's the subprime numbers that they figure out later.
Yeah, I think it's like the factors.
The factor of primes.
Yeah.
That's right. Not subprime mortgages. Wrong movie.
Yeah, that's when we do The Big Short.
Yeah. I was just watching that the other day. That's why.
Yeah.
Or a couple of scenes from it. And he's stuck in this circle of the same sort of metal
I think he calls
wires.
I think Quentin calls it the sushi machine.
Oh,
later
yeah,
on.
for sure. Yeah, he goes, you want to go in the sushi machine?
Right.
It's like not a sphere. What's the thing where it's
like a tomato or an apple cutter
no,
kind
it's
of thing.
But it's in the shape. But it's in the shape. Yes, it's an apple cutter, but in the shape of a cucumber.
Yeah.
or like an eggplant.
Yes, it's like an ovular strobile kind of shape, and pulls together,
and then you get the coolest moment in the movie where he does a front roll.
Yes,
like
the big
as
action
it closes.
sequence.
Yeah, the big action sequence when they spent the greatest stunt. But those are the best stunts when it's like the big moment and you don't repeat it and you let it sing on its own. But
yeah, what did this scene say to you?
So what this scene says to me is that even with traps, you can survive.
Mm.
The traps of society are not fatal, or they're not, what's the word, inevitable.
Yeah.
Because that's his second trap, remember? He has a bloody hand.
Right.
He's adaptable.
Right.
Quentin can survive certain traps.
Yeah. And they all can.
And he'll survive one later once we talk about another character.
Yeah, maybe another type of trap. Yeah.
Yeah.
This actually brings me, before we go to that idea that you just said brings me to a very big idea I think that this movie is communicating to us. So let me start here. The sushi machine. Now, the whole question is, why... It doesn't explain why Quentin survived the very first trap. I think that's just more of an exposition thing and learning the world.
Yeah.
Right? But in this case, do you remember? How does Quentin survive the trap?
Levin warns him.
Yes. Levin says, stop. And they do this amazing focus rack.
Yeah.
Like this amazing pull to like zero depth of field on him to zero depth of field on this one wire.
Yeah.
So cool.
Or the series of wires.
Like it's the foreground and then the wire behind him in the background.
Yeah.
That sequence is incredible. Meticulously storyboarded, by the way. On the DVD, it lays it out. But in that moment, he's able to see it. He doesn't even see the trap until she says stop.
Yeah.
That's what that focus pull is telling us.
Yeah.
Then he dives out just in time and it catches only his leg. So I think what this thing is saying is that they're goners if they're on their own.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that as cynical and sad as the movie can be in your eyes, as a viewer about how this whole entire trap was created by everyone, by society, and so on, the individual is dead meat. We do our best, I think this movie is saying, when we collaborate. It's the power of collaboration, you know? And even Quentin did the same thing for Levin at the very beginning, when he says, stop, when they expose Levin. And then he goes into the room to make sure there's no trap, and then safely gets her to the other side. Remember?
Yeah.
So
in the most pointless, heroic moment in the movie.
Right.
Because she's already walked into the room, and he just performatively gets in and carries her out.
Right. But
what would he do?
I think,
that says more about Quentin than your point.
Right. It's about the gesture.
Yes.
Right. But that's establishing the whole idea, which is how someone escapes from this cube. Right? They do it. They did it. As complex and layered and convoluted as this cube is, mathematically, structurally, and so on, they accomplish the goal. They escape the escape room. Now, how the hell do they do that? They each use their individual talents for a specific reason, but there's no way that they would be able to do it on their own.
Yeah.
Even Quentin pulls the group together, and he's the group morale at the beginning. He's what lifts Worth off of the floor.
Yeah.
He's what pulls them together, and he is a leader at the beginning. He just becomes drunk with power, and it corrupts him, and so on. And he goes, insane, and apparently becomes horny. But
well, there's a reason. Not a good reason. But
right. There's a backstory, and there's enough that needs to be there to explain.
Yeah, he got a fear boner.
Right. But the point is that the movie is saying that we can solve the problems of the day. We can escape. We can save ourselves from ourselves, but not the self from the individual self. It's the collective self. It's the human race.
Yeah.
And it is showing us all of the horrors of what happens when we don't do that. We create unintentional traps and horrors and structures, whether they're physical or metaphysical or conceptual, systems, if you will, like you said before. We create systems of madness. And I actually want to get into really quick, if it's possible, an example of this that I think is so prescient. The gun problem that we have in this country. Right? We're both American. We're broadcasting from America right now, Los Angeles to be particular. But we have a horrible gun problem. And I think this movie draws this one-to-one to this problem, right? It's an institutional problem. It's a political problem. There's a stalemate of the system that doesn't allow for an opening, an off-ramp away from this problem right now, which is very frustrating. Now, here's the thing. There's a criticism maybe of this movie from some people, Cube, but why is it so gratuitous? Why is it so gross? Why do we see Alderson's organs, like you said, however cool it is for people like us? Why is it so violent and so on? Well, I would say, and you know what I'm probably going to say, Alderson being cubed, even in the beginning, is nothing compared to watching a child get blown apart, flesh everywhere, from an assault rifle or machine gun, AR-15, whatever it is. And somehow, Jesse, our system has produced this cube, right? They've produced, even if you don't want to call it the whole cube, this is one of the traps. This is one of the rooms in the cube, right? And we not only created it, but we can't seem to find how to collaborate in the way that Levin and Quentin do to prevent him from being swallowed by this, sliced by the sushi machine.
Yeah.
We haven't been able to collaborate in such a way, or have the good faith to, that prevents children from being sliced by the sushi machine.
Yeah.
Right? It's the worst horror of all. So if you're thinking that, Quentin's leg being scraped or someone's face being melted by acid is tough, walk into a public school.
Yeah, we let the images escape us of real life horrors.
Right.
And we also couch the language to our sensibilities. We, you know, we have canned responses to these situations that are shared. We all know what they are.
Right. It's like we've all watched the trap work. It's what it does. It works its function.
And people who, you know, may call these school shootings or other tragedies that are similar, were, you know, describe them in the way you did, like you know, it's a meat grinder.
Yeah.
And that can be considered uncouth or counterproductive, but sitting there
exploitative
or yeah,
something like that.
But sitting there letting it happen is worse than
Yes.
talking about it in a realistic way.
Right. It's a distraction from the fact that we built the cube.
Yeah.
The problem of
Or that we maintain the cube.
yeah, and that's an even whole other branch of it. That's a whole other layer on top. It's like building the cube in one respect. You know, if Holloway was right, and if it was just miles under the desert, but it was just a public works project that disappeared. You know, Area 51. Let's say it was empty. It was discovered, but it was empty, right? This government project or a public works project, and it's collecting cobwebs, and it reminds, you know, bunkers maybe for the atomic bomb years ago. It's something that reminds us of a mistake that we made, and we can learn from it. But like you said, we're maintaining the cube. The system is in place still in such a way where people are not only scouted, you know, for their specific talents, but like Holloway said, they're stripped. They came into their homes. They're stripped bare. They're put against their will into a prison. I mean, it does mirror, I think, perhaps, at least the concept of putting children into a school which becomes a prison. And we don't know how to not make that a prison, right? We don't know how to not make that a trapped room.
Yeah. And
not
the
a safe
irony
room.
is the more they make it safe, the more they make it a prison, you know?
Yeah. And that's just, I think that's a little bit of Worth speaking, where that's where this enormous cynicism comes from.
Yeah.
You know, it's like why can't we almost know preconceived of a notion that we can't collaborate in the way there's a bad faith, there's no faith, there's an erring on the side of this is just not going to work. And that's like Worth sitting down on the floor and Quentin saying, Quentin is the authority, right? Saying, hey, you can help me out here, buddy. And then, you know, Worth is the constituents of the candidate, right? Or the lay people laying down there and saying, what's the point?
Yeah.
Why are we, you know, whatever. Let's just lay down and die, right? Because there is no off-ramp. There is no way out of the system. But that sushi machine scene, to go back to that I think is telling us that we can collaborate in such a way where we can escape the traps that even we have constructed for ourselves.
Yeah.
There is a way. And it gets Kazan out of the cube. And I would like to switch now to said character, Kazan.
Kazan.
Right? So Kazan appears, you know, seemingly out of nowhere. And he is the last person to appear. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I did write a little bit of a blurb on each character. I'm not going to read you each one and bore you guys. But for Kazan, I kind of felt like he was, like Jesse said earlier, each of these are these sort of societal slivers or philosophies of societies or segments of societies. I think that Kazan is, aside from being the obvious sort of on its face representation of humans with disabilities,
and
which is
and the people we take care of and the people we bring along.
Right. And that's a little bit less on the nose, and it veers into that category as well, right? Just people that are needy or in need of something that we can provide that they can't provide for themselves.
Yeah.
And it's of no consequence of their own actions, say, right? Yeah. But I think that
which is a fundamental role that society plays.
Absolutely. I mean,
that's the point of grouping together.
Yeah.
But yes.
And Holloway leads the charge for that. But yeah, we'll talk about that soon. But I also think that in a deeper sense, Kazan is sort of a representation of human agnosticism and innocence. Like I don't know how this works. I don't know the bigger picture, even more than less than the other characters. I don't know enough. And yet there's an innocence to it that's still very important and worth preserving always. And I think it's that combined with the endless capabilities and talents of the human brain to excel in like specific academic disciplines. Like his savant technique is incredible, and these people exist. And it's unthinkable to the rest of us that someone could solve math problems to that magnitude, even to Levin,
Right.
who has a facility for it. And so he's like this computation mixed with vulnerability. The human as a machine with also emotion.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? What did you think of Kazan?
I think he's underdeveloped, even for what the point is. I was a little worried when they had the token disabled character who's also a math genius randomly. Like we've seen that before,
Right.
And it's one of the things I think about is, since you mentioned the ending, the thing I think about most about Kazan and his innocence in society.
We will save, the ending stuff mostly for the ending. But
Mostly for the ending.
Yeah, go on.
But the idea that what we do is for the innocent.
Right.
What we do is not for ourselves,
Yeah.
but for someone else. So
Yes.
in that sense, it's an interesting point of view. I just think it's a little on the nose.
Sure. I also think that there are a couple moments that I just want to touch before we move on to toward the ending of the movie. There's this. Speaking of Quentin, Quentin has a busy, eventful second half of the movie,
And a busy, eventful first half of the movie. Actually, before we get to what I know you're going to talk about.
Oh, sure.
I just want to say the relationship between Levin and Quentin, where it's like the older guy, younger girl, flirty, sort of like when she goes like, read them to me, and you're like, oh, damn.
Yeah.
You're like, uh-oh.
Yeah. And it starts out, again, he's her hero.
Yes.
And then she's his hero.
She hugs him, and he
Right.
doesn't do anything.
Right, she hugs him.
He's just like the sturdy wall.
Right.
It's not him. It's the idea of him.
Right. And that again goes into the complexity of the human being and
our base instincts.
Our base
and
instincts.
our expectations.
Right. Our drive to love and
Yeah.
be loved, and what that means and scenario by scenario as you go through life, that changes. And the love needs to be strong enough, and the trust needs to be strong enough to be malleable and survive every moment in life.
Love and
This
trust.
doesn't.
Love
Yeah.
and trust, absolutely.
Yes.
And I don't want to spend too much time on this. I just wanted to bring it up to set up for what we'll talk about later.
Yes, absolutely. And then, this moment is more about, I think, perhaps the relationship between Quentin and Holloway.
Yes.
Because, right now I want to talk about, for a second, they discover the edge, the end of the cube, right? And they can see the shell, the sarcophagus, across the way. And Holloway goes out to explore it. And then they all do, again, the teamwork thing, working really hard to hold the clothing tied together.
Yeah.
And to support her. And then it's up to Quentin at the very end to save her. He holds her hand and he sees a lane. A very evil lane, Jesse. That's why I'm switching to this very serious trailer voice.
Your
In a world.
your 70s horror in
a world where Quentin is a total asshole.
yeah.
The
Only thing more terrifying. Yeah.
The only thing more terrifying than the first cube are the 17,543 other cubes.
Yes, exactly.
No, but
The only thing then more terrifying than the beginning, the rest of the movie.
right, yeah. And we're referring to what movie was that again? That's
Suspiria had this trailer
Suspiria.
from the 70s that said, the only thing more terrifying than the last 12 minutes are the other 95. I love it. Okay.
so good. Speaking of Halloween, do with that what you will, folks. But yeah, he sees a lane and he takes the evil lane. He makes the decision, and you see it on his face first, right? In a very dramatic kind of way. And I love that actor. He's very like expressive, and I think it works well for the movie.
Yeah.
Because he goes more insane as he goes on. So he drops her, and he tries to make it seem like he doesn't try very hard, but he just kind of says, she
Oops.
slipped. Oops. Oops. So how about that boot? No, so he drops her, and it's very deliberate. It's very obvious. And that's the end of Holloway. So first of all, Jesse, how did that moment make you feel when you watched it for the first time? And I guess even the second time.
It felt
mostly
inevitable.
The first time. Okay. Why? And why is that important to your take and the meaning?
It felt like these are the kinds of situations we find ourselves in, and these are the moments that we're tested. And again, people fall into the same traps,
Yeah.
pitfalls. He makes the same decision to leave behind.
Traps and pitfalls. You get 2 gold stars for both of those.
Thank you. I've been waiting for a gold star my whole life. No, Kazan. He's been trying to leave Kazan behind the whole time, and Holloway's been standing in their way. And in his way about a bunch of other stuff, she gets his number about why he's not with his wife and why he probably isn't with his kids that he's living for.
Such an intense scene.
Yeah, when he slaps her.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And he says, "No wonder why your wife left you."
Is that why? Is that she said? She says, like, "Is that what you do to your kids?"
Right. And then he absolutely short circuits.
Yeah.
And then she says, "And a thing for young girls." And I think that's the thing that I think makes him slap her.
Oh,
when he says a thing for young girls. Yeah. And like you said, you can see it in maybe Levin, like there's truth there, but these people are...
But it's a guess.
It's a guess. But that's what he does. But
Yeah.
she's saying, I can do that too.
I mean, she
You're
struck
not the
a
only
chord.
one.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, she struck a chord. So,
Which is, and he pretends that she knew about him, so she did his psychological profile or whatever.
yes. So again, like I was saying at the beginning for my take, it's the complexity and mystery of the human experience, the human condition. We're so capable of collaborating in constructive ways, but we're also so easily capable of building up that relationship, building up that progress, and then being destructive, demolishing civilizations as well as building them. It's such a twofold power struggle that exists in human affairs. And Natali captures this and his crew brilliantly. And I think the performances are great. They're not like the best performances I've ever seen.
Right.
Like they're not winning Oscars. Although Natali won the Canadian equivalent of an Oscar, I think for either director or screenplay, something like that. Wow. I can't remember. Yeah. But And Holloway versus Quentin is kind of an interesting microcosm of that. And another interesting thing to me, Jesse, was that at the very beginning, if you remember, first, Quentin pulls Holloway out of the door and throws her to the ground and lifts his fist to punch her.
Yeah.
And then she screams and skedaddles to the corner. Then he says, I'm sorry. He repeats, I'm sorry, and says, I'm not going to hurt you.
Yeah.
He's just confused. So that really acts as a harbinger of what's going to come. So he's revealing who he is. But then the front comes on and says, hey, survival instinct, we need to work together. But then once he sees that lane, he does do that downward punch.
He drops
that was instinctual for him.
Yeah.
So again, it's this constant battle in this cube and in humanity between what our instincts will drive us to, which are very destructive, versus what we have the capacity to prevent in terms of destruction. Constantly doing battle with each other, right? Especially in this cube, putting a real spotlight and a microscope on all of these kinds of things. Then, of course, the trap that we skipped over that we wanted to talk about, the noise-activated trap.
Yeah.
So now that we've got our kind of dynamics between Holloway and Quentin and Kazan, I think you mentioned to me that this was your favorite trap.
Yeah, this was the scariest for me.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Why, and again, how does it factor into your thesis here?
again, inevitability, lack of control. You do not set off the trap for yourself.
Right.
You put trust in others.
Right.
I mean, the fact that Worth goes first and they're mad at Worth, or at least Quentin is, he can make a sound and kill him easily.
Yeah, that's so true.
Without having to exert, he doesn't have to beat him up and hope he actually does kill him, or
Right.
hope something doesn't happen to him.
Of course, we went back in time from the Holloway
Yes,
drop,
yes.
so no one's died yet.
Yeah,
at
no one's
Quentin's hands.
No,
but yes.
Quentin hasn't killed anyone.
But you're right.
But he is. I think this is after. The confession.
It is after the confession, and it's right after
Because he's
where
making him go first.
He's making him go first, and that's why. And Quentin says Kazan is not coming.
Yeah.
And then Holloway says, "Of course he's coming, Quentin. He's a human being."
Yeah.
And then that's when Levin says, "But we will come back for him." And Holloway says, "That's a lie, and you know it." It's a very sentimental and it's a proud moment for Holloway.
Yeah.
Like she's doing the correct sort of liberal sticking up for the, and then of course Kazan turns out to be an essential component to escaping. Mm-hmm. They cannot do it without him because they can't determine which rooms are not trapped.
The factor, yeah.
It's astonishing, all the details here. But anyway, please continue.
So the thing I love is how quiet it is and how long the sequence goes for.
Yeah.
It just goes and goes and goes.
After endless talking.
Yeah, after the confession scene and after everything, it's just so tense. I could barely hang on during that scene. And then, I mean, even just when Worth is climbing down and you're like, oh, wow, it's impressive that he can do that and that they all have to do that.
Right.
They have to get to the floor, walk over, find one. And they kind of skip over some of this. They probably should have had Levin go first because she can help find the right way forward, at least at this point in the movie.
Yeah, that's true.
Once we finally get everyone through, and it's just Quentin, they stop paying attention to Kazan. They don't keep him on covering his mouth,
Right.
to stop him from making the sounds.
Right.
And he makes a sound at the last second. And again, Quentin has to escape a trap.
Yes.
And in dramatic style, in dramatic fashion.
Yes.
And it's the other coolest scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of cool.
For sure. Sleek,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Amazing visual.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though, like you said, it's not realistic, but it doesn't matter at all.
No.
At all.
Yeah. It's not like there are holes where the spikes come out of. The spikes melt into the wall.
Right.
Like when you look at the close-ups, they literally do that.
Right.
And you get this idea that like one trap he escapes with help and one without. Mm-hmm. It's like no one's getting out of this alive, It's like you could have help, you could not have help. You're getting a trap and you got to survive on your own.
Yeah. I don't know if maybe this is a little too much, but it also, I mean, each trap kind of, when it's based on like the stimulus of the human being, like a specific action, it almost seems to represent something to me. Like, when you go into a room and just your mere presence in there gets your face melted off. It's like, be careful where you go, and the choices that you make. And this is sort of like be careful what you say and where you say it. It says something about human affairs because it's all about communication, right? This movie, it's about figuring things out through being verbal. And of course, they figure out how to do this verbally, and the answer tends to be nonverbal, and that's kind of cool. But it is be careful how you conduct yourself with the other people. It's not just like, band together, and then you can somehow like power through it, like how he gets out of the sushi machine. It's like this is a very meticulously planned trap escape, and of course Kazan almost kills him, but it's innocent, and he does escape, which is it's very suspenseful. Whenever I show this movie to people, because I've seen it like 1 billion times,
right,
I love looking at people's faces during that scene. It's ridiculous how much tension this $365,000 budget movie creates
Yeah.
in every moment, let alone that scene.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I also love, just as an aside, how many montages of them going through rooms there are.
Yeah.
Like there's one in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like even before the Wren dies.
Yeah.
They have a montage of boot throwing and crossfading between rooms. And it's the same thing.
Right.
And yet you feel like they're moving.
Right,
It's
right.
incredible.
Yeah. And then just one more quick thing about, again, the mystery and complexity of humanity. For that noise scene, just to make this point of, you know how sometimes, like, you're with friends or you're doing something and it feels great, but then like one moment later you're lonely, or you're working together to get something done and you feel really constructive, and then something else happens and you're not with any of those people anymore and you get something done on your own and you're like, oh, there's like more than one way to do something, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's not as good, or there's just, everything is very ebby and flowy with human interaction, right?
Yeah, contrast.
Moving from one, it's amorphous and it just kind of keeps moving around and it's fluid. I feel like that's what this is like. It depends on the trap. It depends on the problem. It depends on the societal issue, right? There's no skeleton key, right? There's no panacea to solve every problem with human collaboration. That's why the collaboration part itself is so important.
Ingenuity and collaboration are the keys.
Right. Ingenuity is another good way of putting it. Some traps, I imagine, I'm not so sure for this movie, but sometimes less collaboration is a good thing. Like maybe it wasn't a good idea to have Kazan sticking his head through the chute where he could say something. Maybe less people was better.
Right.
Like it depends on the situation.
Or like the Wren throwing the boot to give them clues,
Right. It just wasn't the right solution. There is no one self-righteous way to do everything.
Yeah.
And that's why the movie makes such a strong point of all of these people being individually essential, and yet the right combination of them at the right times are what get them through the traps. And to the end, the right type of thinking, the right this, the right that, as opposed to all of them firing on all their cylinders at all times.
Yeah.
It's that's the complexity part of it. And then the mystery, of course, is just the mystery of the universe. You never know what problem it's going to throw at you next.
Yeah. And the thing about you saying the mystery of the universe, back to the cube versus sphere discussion about the world being analogous to the cube. They talk about so many different theories and philosophies that it's truly astounding that they really cover points of view. And you know what's one thing they never bring up? Religion. God.
Yeah.
They never discuss it. The
closest they come is Holloway giving this hilarious line at the beginning saying, "Holy cats." She does. He avoids it so much, you're right, that she doesn't even say like holy, Christ or whatever it is that she could say.
It's like the creation myth. It's like, how did this become to be? I had a couple theories.
The mystery.
I had a couple theories about. I know we're not really going into who did this, but I do have a couple theories.
Sure.
It could be the government. Could be aliens. But I really think a private company. There are a lot of rich companies that are out there that really have the capacity to spend money to create stuff that they're not thinking about for now. It's like a ship of Theseus. It's like Tim Cook pushing on from Steve Jobs. Tim Cook, like his superpower, quote unquote, is efficiency and organization of the business and supply chain, and creating the iPhone and making the iPhone the perfect item.
Right.
What's next? Who is next? What is the next person going to do? What are they going to build? Then I've got Jigsaw. I think it might be Jigsaw.
Sure.
And then the last one are the mole people. The mole people did it. It's all underground.
Yeah.
But
that one is not in the movie, so that's interesting. The most interesting one is the mole people one.
Yeah, exactly.
I just have to say that right now.
Yeah. But I just love this question. Like, which is scarier, headless beast or an evil genius? You know?
Yeah.
It's like, which one of these options is scarier? Is just an amorphous idea of aliens, the government, a company that just is and does, kind of like what Worth is talking about,
right?
Or a government or private companies working with the government to make money.
Yeah,
like Holloway discusses. Like, I always wonder which is scarier, and like, if true, which. And I know Jigsaw's a joke, but also it could literally be to torture people for entertainment. Yeah,
like the man with the golden gun, like Quentin is saying.
Yeah,
and Holloway just completely laughs him off as a conspiracy theorist, which is hilarious.
Salamanga,
right? Because a few scenes later, she's like, "I was right. It's the military-industrial complex. No one's gonna call me paranoid anymore." And she just goes absolutely insane.
Like, you've been holding that in for a bit, haven't you?
Right. And then they cut back to the Worth and Quentin's reactions, and they're just like, Holloway, calm down. But then that's when Worth says this thing, where just to react to what you're saying, Worth says this thing, Holloway, get with the program. It's not that. And then when he explains what he kind of basically thinks that it is, the headless blunder under the illusion of a master plan, she basically says, it's so much worse than I thought. And again, it goes into what I think is so scary about this movie. Because, like you said, that corporation, I tend to think it's some kind of a corporation-oriented thing too. But it's about the money. It's about currency, which is, that in and of itself is a non-physical concept.
The thing is about profit is for the company. The people make the money.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if the thing is profitable if everyone gets rich making the thing.
That's exactly what Worth is saying.
Yeah.
He's like, this was a great gig. I got paid really well for this thing. Yeah. You know? And he is implying, and it actually goes along a little bit with what Holloway was saying at the beginning of her little diatribe, where she was like, the right arm is disconnected from the left arm, and before you know it, you've got a deadly trap buried under the desert in New Mexico, or whatever the hell she says. Yeah. But at the first part, that kind of aligns with what Worth is saying. He's saying, we just did our jobs. We participated in the system. We got paid. We didn't know what the end result was going to be, but we got to make a living, you know? So it's like, whose fault is it at that point? But I do think that it comes to the mishandling intentions of earning a livelihood with money, with getting paid, you know, earning your keep, being able to keep yourself afloat in the world by paying your bills. It seems like a very trivial and, you know, self-evident, normal concept.
Yeah.
But that is so dangerous in the wrong hands. Even in hands that are, you know, well-intentioned. That's the scariest part. It's like Worth could have been thinking that he was working on an extremely important, like, military project that's going to help protect everyone.
Yeah.
And then it devolves into a torture device that no one knows about.
Yeah.
For its own citizens.
Yeah.
And that is so scary to me.
Wow. This whole conversation has really made me think, and
good.
I hereby renounce my membership in the Democratic Party, and I've now joined communism.
God.
I hereby declare. Anyway.
The Communist Party probably created the cube. And
you're
exactly. Like, no, now I got to go over again. I have to move all my crap again. This is not going to be fun.
I got to give the card back. Did you get a card?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, Jesse, we covered a lot of, I think, what are the essentials. There's clearly more in this movie. There's so much there, but
yeah, I mean, Quentin fighting, going insane, all the battles.
Yeah. The moment where he says to Levin, you're the perfect lock into the key. Your key into the lock. It's time to go down. It's time to go down, he says.
Yeah.
And then when he says the something about the boot, where he says to Worth, or he says to Levin or something like that, you don't want the boot.
Yeah, because Worth asked for, because she asked for the boot, and
Yeah.
he beat Worth with the boot.
with it.
And so
Yeah.
he's saying, you don't want me to do this to you. But
Right.
the only thing I wanted to mention is now Worth and Levin are working together.
Right, but the alternative definition of getting the boot,
Yeah.
like, you'll be gone. You'll
Yeah.
get the boot. You're out of here.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. But
It's all three.
go on.
Yeah. But I just wanted to set the stage of Quentin
Yes.
going insane.
Yes.
The group sort of splitting, fighting Quentin, getting his neck in the thing, in the door, then creating the trap long enough to trick him into falling through one of the doors.
Right. And yeah, in that respect, things just evolve in a very Lord of the Flies kind of a
Yeah.
way. And yeah. No, that's a great setup. Because what we're going to do now is how we always like to end. We're going to talk about the final sequence and the final image of this movie. And we're going to connect it to the meaning. And I just think that you've done a great job so far, Jesse. And I can't wait to hear what you think about this ending. So I'm going to summarize it for everyone. Oh, I've been waiting for this. This is such a cool ending. So Levin, Worth, and Kazan make it to the bridge. It's a red room, of course. Kazan opens the door. A harsh light emits from the other side, indicating an exit. Levin is thrilled. But Worth sits down on the floor. He says he has nothing to live for out there. Levin says, "What is out there?" Worth says, "A boundless human stupidity," as we see a white light form from the outside. Levin says, "I can live with that." Levin is suddenly impaled and lifted into the air and thrown to the ground by Quentin, who just snuck into the room, and he has this psychotic, crazed face covered in blood. Worth screams and leaps toward Quentin, trying to take him down and fight him. Worth yells at Kazan to get out through the door as Quentin overtakes him. Quentin stabs Worth with the same door handle he used to kill Levin. Quentin turns toward Kazan. He puts out his bloodied hands, almost like to strangle him maybe, and says, "Red Kazan." Kazan opens the door and crawls through. Quentin goes through halfway through the door, and he's holding Kazan in place, keeping him from escaping. But also, Worth is holding Quentin in place halfway through the door. Then the room shakes turbulently. Then an extreme close-up of Quentin's terrified eyes, and then an awesome wide, which shows the room shifts away from that portal outside, the bridge door, leaving a trail of blood around that open door from Quentin's body being split apart.
Greatest smudge in film.
Oh, so cool. Well, great CGI smudge. The bridge room descends downward and disappears into the depths of the bottom of the cube, and it clunks down and it hits the bottom. Worth lays down and moves closer to Levin's body in that room. He surrenders and spreads out onto the floor and dies. We cut to the final image. In a medium-wide shot, Kazan is in a corridor backlit by the blinding white light. He's facing us. He turns around toward the light, and we zoom in on him slowly as he walks toward the light until the edges of the corridor are gone, and it's all white light enveloping Kazan. Kazan spreads his arms at his sides as if in awe and continues walking. Kazan then disappears with a dip to white as a synth drone and mysterious high pitch bending effect leave us with an ethereal and mystifying feeling. The screen remains white while black end credits and strange soundscapes lead us out of the movie. All right, so Jesse, what did you think about this whole very Shakespearean ending here and the meaning of this final image of Kazan
I want to
disappearing?
focus on the final image.
Sure,
because
go for it.
The other stuff is straightforward and sort of lays into what we've been discussing about their roles in society.
Yes.
And just briefly, Worth stepping up in the end. He's been stabbed in the gut and beaten like 4 times and dropped through a hole. And he's like, no, you're not getting Kazan.
Right.
It doesn't seem like he's saying, no, I want to live. He's saying, no, you're not getting Kazan.
Right.
That's the moment it felt like. Anyway,
Yeah, it's bitter.
It's bit. Yeah, it's like I'm not going. You're not going either, buddy.
Right.
So I don't know where that came from. That came from the future.
Yeah.
The thing I love about the final image is it has like this ethereal, like, oh, we're not going to tell you what's out there type message. You know, it could be the aliens. But I just love the idea that like he's been in darkness for so long and the room is so dim. His eyes have adjusted and he's just walking outside.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's how bright it is that he can't see.
Right.
I think that tickles me that he just walks back into society. I think that just tickles me.
Is it because he's Kazan and not someone else?
No, I think anyone could have.
Yeah.
But yes, maybe because it's Kazan is why
Yeah.
it tickles me.
Right.
But mostly, I think the idea that it's like in a mountain, you know, and you just walk out the side
Yeah.
and you just see a bright light, and then the sun is so bright that it takes your eyes time to adjust.
Yeah. I want to ask you a specific question
Yeah,
here.
please.
What do you make of the irony that's clearly instilled in this moment? That Kazan, who's, you know, I don't necessarily agree with this term, but an idiot savant
Yeah.
character.
Yeah.
Like you said, the
it's such an
token
uncomfortable-
disabled character.
Yeah, it's such an uncomfortable idea. And
But
yet,
what do you make of that
Right,
irony? What does it mean here?
it's about how society is for others. Personal responsibility is not you being responsible for your person. It's being personally responsible in society.
Right.
And it's about leaving a world for your children. Not that he's a child. I understand that but you give the world to the next generation. You give the world to someone else.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, I didn't really think about that. That is brilliant. I think on top of that, there's this, like I kind of revealed earlier, that I think that Kazan is a sort of agnosticism and innocence, and there's something that's very humble about that. And I think it takes a sort of humbleness and humility about you in order to navigate throughout the traps of life in such a way where you will emerge in a place where you don't have the kinds of super heavy regrets, you know, that will bog you down like it did Quentin and ultimately consume you and prevent you from not only just helping yourself, but even helping other people and contributing to society. It might even render you destructive to society. Quentin was the most helpful character at the beginning of the story. He was the leader of the pack. Then he turns into a bad apple and ends up wanting to kill everyone. But
As he gets more and more desperate, yeah.
right, but you know what's interesting? Even Kazan comforts Quentin when Quentin has that low point where he starts crying.
Yeah.
And he says, maybe you're right, Worth. Maybe there isn't a way out of here. And Quentin starts to kind of crumble. And for the first time, he's sort of nihilistic and hopeless. Kazan comes over and starts petting his head and trying to comfort him. There's a humility in the Kazan character that I think shows, even though it's ironic because we don't get to know Kazan because he can't express himself in the same way that everyone else does. That's like the ultimate irony. But there's a humility there that allows Kazan to avoid certain types of societal traps, I think. And it's a lesson that we can take from Kazan to be that person. It's that whole idea, I think, of you judge someone by how they respond to adversity.
Yeah.
Right? And Quentin absolutely crumbles under the pressure and under that adversity. Kazan is nervous for everyone. It's almost like he doesn't really care that much about himself. He's almost like the ultimate example of, like I said, humility and even a hopefulness.
Yeah.
Even if that hope is just boiled down to, I hope I get gumdrops out of this. You know what I mean?
And even in the silence scene where he accidentally almost kills Quentin,
Yeah.
he's watching with bated breath.
Yeah.
He cares.
Yes. Yeah, he cares deeply about all of these people. They're now friends. They're now associates. And of course, even after he kills Holloway and he hears Levin saying, "You dropped her," he just kind of cowers, and he doesn't try to confront it in a way that will, maybe he doesn't have the capacity to somehow, but still just the meaning of this character and the fact that a lot of people describe it as irony. And my take on that final image is he's seen the light. Literally. He's the character that truly deserves, if one can apply that concept of deserving, to see the light, and that light ends up leading him out of the cube, out of the mess of traps. I think that it's very debatable, but I do think that is what that image tells me. He has the right component emotionally in him to avoid a lot of the human destruction.
Yeah.
Which is, that in itself is ironic, but it doesn't live on irony.
But what's interesting is Worth's most human moment and Levin's most kind moment come in that exact same moment where he decides to leave and he doesn't think about them.
Yes.
He just goes because that's what he was going to do. That's what he was.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. They're moving forward. They're going in that room.
Yeah.
And Levin, instead of rushing in, tries to convince Worth to go.
Yes.
And so there's also like a social function and a social failing in helping people. It's
Right.
like another example of not every solution is the same.
Yes.
And it's
Yeah.
sad. And
It is sad.
And it leads to her death.
It does, which is very unfortunate. And if Worth just had a little bit more, let's say, self-worth, he would be able to leave with the two of them, and all three of them would leave.
Or the four of them, and then they die in the next room. But
Sure. But I mean, at the end.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. That is the irony more than having to do with Kazan.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said, it just ties into not everything has the same, but we are humans. And even sometimes even acts of contrition, even though it did get Worth did get Kazan out, will do good, but it won't serve you. And it will even hurt other people.
Yeah.
And it's this question of, utilitarianism. It's this question of ethics. How do we conduct ourselves? But I think what this last scene and this last image are saying is we will ultimately so often act out of impulse and intuition and instinct. It's just wired into us. And it's about a collective understanding that is what we are. That is what we do. So the more that we can understand all of each other's individual talents, and the more that we can somehow come together and collaborate in a way that's innovative and adapts correctly to a situation, and we can communicate correctly to each other and prevent all of the stuff of saving ourselves from ourselves, that's how we get the most people that we can outside of the cube. And that's what the movie is telling us. And unfortunately, there wasn't enough of that component there to get anyone else but Kazan out.
Yeah.
But I do think it's such a striking image, this final image of Kazan kind of reaching out toward this light, and it's like welcoming him. And it's almost like a game show kind of ending, you know?
You know what it reminds me of?
What?
We need to talk about Kevin. the
Really?
ending. I mean, isn't that final shot Tilda Swinton walking out of the
Yeah,
prison?
it dips to white.
Yeah.
You're right. It's a new chance at life. And that is the other thing. It's like we ask ourselves, how different is the outside world? Is he really just walking into another trapped room?
Right.
Right.
Is it really just he walked to the bridge and on the other side of the wall, the shell is just another giant cube, 48 meters by 48 meters or whatever it is?
Is he just going on a bridge from one cube to another
Yeah,
cube?
exactly.
Right. Or I just mean the outside world metaphorically. Is he just going from one trapped cube to another trapped cube?
Yeah. But I wanted to pose the idea that it literally...
Sure. But I do think that the movie, as tragic as it is ultimately optimistic because of the collaboration and someone does get out of the cube.
Yeah.
And I do think that similarly to the end of Kevin, which Jesse and I did, we need to talk about Kevin. It's the last movie we covered a few episodes ago. Just like the end of that movie, Dipping to White, there is a sense of, but you can start again. But the world you can see the world through a different perspective now because of this other experience, because of this trap and this ordeal. You can go out there and it's not just another color with the same panel, with the same door. It's a big white light that contains a mystery. It's not a guarantee
it contains
of
everything.
A non-trap. Yeah, it contains everything which includes all of the horrible stuff that you experience in the cube. But it's everything else also. And it's welcoming you to strive for the everything else.
Yeah.
And the everything else is what we need to really, really strive for. And we can do it together. We don't know how yet, but we'll figure it out. So the fan question for this episode is, Jesse's waiting with heavy anticipation for this. What is the one word that describes your emotional state while watching Cube? Sorry, you just get one word. You guys can use hyphens. I'll accept hyphens. Maybe even, compound words are fine, but not two words. Just one word to describe your emotional state while watching Cube. And of course, that can extend to watching the end of the movie or during the movie. But I want us to talk about what this movie made us feel like, because it is so unique and it's so specific and individual, and the space is very specific, the characters are very specific. We want to know how you felt when you watched this movie. Let's have a conversation. And you guys can comment in the comment section of whatever platform you're watching this on. And as always, I would like to extend a huge heartfelt thank you to Jesse Mendelsohn for coming on the podcast. You guys out there, you have to understand that these people they're giving me their time, and they're spending so much time and energy and using so many skills that these guests have worked so hard over such a long period of time to hone skills and studying cinema and getting out there into the field, working, appreciating, figuring out how to communicate, how others communicate. It's just amazing to watch you guys in this process. And I just really want to thank you so much for giving your time toward the podcast and for the listeners on this movie.
Thank you. That's very kind. And on behalf of all the guests, some I know and some I don't, we thank you.
Well, it's the feeling's mutual. So it's just, we love what we do here.
Yeah, absolutely.
We really do. But thank you again.
And thank you for having me on again. This is always a delight.
Oh, my pleasure. This was so much fun. I honestly can't imagine who could do this better. So thank you for all of your wisdom and your contributions. And I hope we gave you guys a lot to think about from this movie. I've never seen this movie on a podcast. And I think even if it was on a podcast, I just don't think that it would be crushed in a good way, the way that Jesse did. So I think that it was just so much fun. And I really love doing this, especially for movies like this that don't get enough appreciation. I think the movie's freaking phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal, especially for a directorial debut. Oh my goodness, Vincenzo. We need to have a candlelit dinner and talk about how you did this. That's what we need to do. And a huge thank you to our incredibly loyal and beautiful audience, our listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in every 2 weeks to the Speaking Cinema podcast. And you can like our content and follow it and subscribe and share and all that good stuff at our Instagram page, which is at Speaking Cinema Podcast. We also just recently launched our TikTok page, which with some fun shorts, and they're on YouTube as well. But that's Speaking Cinema Pod on TikTok. So, and please let us know if you have any movie suggestions that you're desperate for us to do, and interact with us. We love talking with you. We want your thoughts. We want to discuss some deep, cool, fun stuff. We want your reactions to these episodes. So don't be shy. And just a reminder, we always release what movie we're going to be doing on that Instagram page 1 week prior to the movie episode dropping. So make sure you check that out, and check out our 2 other horror movie podcasts popping up in this month for the Halloween series. We will have another one dropping October 15th, and the final one dropping with Adam Secafico on Halloween itself. And October 15th will be John Bewley. So we'll get those movies to you, the titles, 1 week ahead of time. So as always, thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you on the next episode.